Hello and welcome back to 8 Cube Circus. This is the second episode of the podcast where we bring the high infinite perspective to everyone. I'm joined by Denish, who is a known Hella player and popularized the Hella list that you know today with Corvus Glaive and Blink. I'm also joined by Xenaid, who is a self-proclaimed bad deck enjoyer. But that's not what we're going to be talking about today, because we're going to be talking about the good decks of this season, our best performing ones. What do we think? How did this season go for everybody?
I did really well. But only in like the last couple days. I spent the first half of the season kind of messing around with tech cards, and then I found what we'll talk about later, and oh my god, it's been a really fun season to be honest. I love playing around with Merlin, well like messing up Merlin players.
Yeah, my season, I was top like 500 at some point. I think I got to top 300. I've hit 8,000. We're really up and down here by choice. I played Morgan the entire first 2 weeks till Nightmare came out, and then that card was way too boring. Was that this season?
Yes, Nightmare was this season.
Yeah, that was this season, huh? And then I played Clea. I was really trying to build around that deck, but wasn't very good. So I'm back on Morgan, and I really stopped caring about climbing this season. But you'll see some good stats from me.
Yeah, so my season was, I started off sort of continuing my tilt from the end of last season. I tilted a lot at the end of last season, like we're talking like 400 plus snap points down. Uh, I sort of continued that, and then I found a nightmare list. I made one, and I really liked it. And I started to begin to climb again, and then I found the deck that I'm going to be talking about next, where I made it, and I think it was sort of like a meta breaker. And I don't know, because it sort of seems to be turning to be the meta, but I really like that list, and I ended up finishing this season at just above 9,000 snap points.
Hell yeah.
All right, so let's get into the decks. The first deck is going to be mine. It is Hand of Ultron. Now, this deck, I have given it to multiple streamers. I know popular Marvel Snap YouTuber KM Best made a video about this as well. I also made one on this YouTube channel. You can go check it out. I think that this deck is extremely strong, and there's a couple of reasons why I built it the way I did. So first of all, there's another popular Victoria hand list going around, which is basically the Husky Puppies build from February, but with a slightly different tech card. There's multiple different tech cards being run. Nobody quite knows what the best in slot is for that yet. This deck is a good bit different than that. First of all, it's the only good Ancient One deck as of yet, which I'm very proud to have made. Second of all, it is much less vulnerable to Killmonger as compared to other Victoria hand decks because of the Infinity Ultron. This deck is a lot harder to tech against as opposed to the other deck where you can throw Prior and Killmonger on 6 to sort of destroy all of their Victoria handed cards. This deck does not only have one trap that's V-handing. With Mirage, you're pulling a 2 a decent amount of the time. Infinity Ultron is giving you 2s. Frigga is giving you a 2 most of the time. You can't really beat this deck using a Killmonger. Enchantress does stink a little bit against Victoria hand, but if they're committing 4 energy to a lane that you're not really contesting that hard, which is your Victoria hand lane, they can really lose the other 2 lanes on just based on points. I think this deck is very strong. I think it's got some good tech options like Shadow King for the current metagame. I think the Luna Snow is a very important addition in the sense that it helps smooth out your curves. There's a couple of really crazy curves that I talk about in my video that you can get with Luna Snow, but the basic one that I sort of mentioned is if you have a Quinjet on the field with Luna Snow, you can play Victoria Hand Frigga on 5 into Hood Victoria Hand Misery in the Hood Frigga lane on on 5. You can Victoria Hand the Frigga on 4, which gives you 3 Victoria Hands and 2 demons, as well as a 4/9 and 3/6 on the board, which is quite a lot.
Hell yeah. Okay. I want to dive into the deck building of it a little bit because you did mention you built it. The biggest issue that I've had with the deck was justifying anti-venom, but I also don't have speed. So I'm curious why you think anti-venom's best in slot.
So that's a funny part. I think Anti-Venom is absolutely the 12th card in this deck. The reason I'm running Anti-Venom is largely because of Infinity Ultron. So if your hand is getting pretty clogged, which I find it to often be with this deck, but you really want the two Infinity Ultron Stones, you can play Anti-Venom on 4 into the Anti-Venom card and Infinity Ultron on 5 to guarantee both Infinity Ultron Stones. Another reason I like Anti-Venom is just because of you can Misery one of your big... You can sort of Shadow King one of your big power bodies. If you pull a Misery, if you pull an IU, you can always Shadow King that and effectively get the card for 2 cost instead of its 4 or 5 cost. I think that's pretty strong. I definitely think Anti Venom is the 12th card, and I've been sort of toying around with ideas of what else to put in that slot, but nothing really makes as much sense as Anti Venom here. I definitely think it's if you're going to try to if you think the deck is not optimized, that's definitely where I'd start though.
Yeah, another one is Mirage. I'm curious why Mirage, because there's a lot of two-cost generators or even one-cost generators that give cheap cards, and even like I find an IP is really good in general. Why Mirage over these other two-cost hand generators?
So I believe the Mirage IP sort of discussion to be extremely interesting on how I landed on Mirage. So with this deck, you might notice that the cards you are getting your Victoria hand buff on all cost very small. Infinity Ultron Stones are most of the time costing 1 because of Quinjet. Frigga V hand costs like 1 because of Quinjet. Ancient one costs 1 because of Quinjet. Demons cost 1. There's a theme here. You want your V handed cards to cost 1. With IP, you need to pull a 4 drop for that to happen, and you need to win the lane. And although this deck has some good IP follow ups, I think that if you're pulling a 6, it's almost bad because like if you're pulling a 3 cost, even discounted, even with the Quinjet discount, you might rather be playing the IU stones and just playing the more Victoria hand bodies than that one large one. I also think that being so heavy as a curve, you can also opt to play the Mirage cards out early to unclog your hand. You don't really have that luxury with Iron Patriot because the cards are going to cost more. I found that this deck really wants low to the ground card generators, and Mirage is definitely one of them. Another very interesting thing I found with Mirage is that the card I pulled the most with Mirage is actually the Hood, which I think is quite funny. If you're going into more mirrors with this deck, against this Victoria hand deck or the other Victoria hand deck also, Mirage is very good because it's almost always stealing a game piece that you run as well. So you're basically doubling up on your game pieces, and I think that's also strong. So to boil it down, the two answers are Mirror Attack and keeping our Victoria hand cards costing hopefully 1.
Yeah, I like the Mirage pick and AV. If you guys haven't played Anti Venom with Misery Firehair, I can see the synergy there. I've played this list quite a few times, and I do like the AV Misery synergy. I believe when you first came to me, that's Mirage slot used to be Valentina, right?
So the Mirage slot has undergone a few. It went Valentina, sorry, it went Merlin first, which I didn't like. Then it went Valentina, and then it went IP. And I thought about going back to Valentina, but I decided to try Mirage, and it was just so much better than the other stuff in that slot.
Yeah, and it looks like you only really have three generators outside of Mirage. It would be Frigga, Hood, and IU, right? So if you don't play
Correct.
either one of those,
Correct.
Rivian's not getting much value. What would you say are the tech slots in this deck?
Shadow
'Cause-
King.
yeah, but Shadow King seems kind of important for Misery. Would you ever run like Gorgon in that slot, or Surge, or Sam even? If
Um,
Red Guardian can
so,
play again?
okay. There's another sort of reason why there's not a lot of tech other than Shadow King in this deck, and Shadow King is also doing stuff with the anti venom in your deck. So this deck can get over the top of a lot of mid range decks. You can be putting out 12 power demons in this deck like every third game. And in every like other game you're putting out like 8, 10 power demons. You're putting out a lot of points that the typical mid-range non-tech deck cannot handle. So you don't really necessarily need to be teching for that deck. The one deck that can go over the top of you is like werewolf decks because werewolf just gets really big, but you have the appropriate tech for the werewolf in Shadow King. The green power decks cannot scale you, but the decks just like playing cards without the green power, they can't really outscale you. So I think that tech is less needed in this deck than other decks. I mean, obviously, negative's a bad matchup unless you get like Mirage Misery, and then you might be able to scam them for 8 with like I got Mirage Null, and I was able to scam my opponent for 8 because of that. Um, a lot of this deck, I don't really think it needs tech. Basically, I think that it goes tall enough that decks have to tech for it instead of this teching for that. And then the few decks that do go over the top of it, it's because of green power, and we can handle that.
Right. I'll be honest, I have been playing this list as well. I like it a lot. Can you go into a little bit of depth of why Luna Snow is particularly good here?
Okay, so Luna Snow, I've been playing around with this card basically all month. I think it's if they did season recaps, I think Luna Snow would be my most played card this month. Um, there's two reasons why you should be running Luna Snow in your deck. One, because you're a snowballing deck, basically meaning that when you get going, you can get really going, and the Luna Snow energy helps you snowball. The second reason is you have a 5 you want to ramp out on 4. So those are the two main reasons to run Luna Snow in the deck. This deck successfully fills both of those conditions. It has Infinity Ultron, which is extremely good to get out on 4, assuming you have hand space for it. And the second reason is because the snowballs with this deck can get truly insane. I mentioned one of the lines beforehand with 3 V hands and 2 hoods that you can get with the Luna Snow. There's other lines too. Like you can be able to say Hood Misery on 4 into playing like IU Quinjet on 5. So they can't really even stop you from doing the discount. They can't even reaction like RG or Killmonger that Quinjet. And it can get a little out of hand, the lines, because of the snowball effect. So I think that Luna Snow is helping you, one, snowball in this deck, and two, ramp out IU on 4 when you need it, when you need to. But I think this is the perfect build for a Luna Snow, just because it fulfills both of the conditions that you need to justify running her. Also,
So
3/6 is good.
yeah, 3/6 is really good. So you're saying Luna Snow is a snowball card?
Yeah.
All right. I'm missing speed and I'm missing ancient one. When I asked, you recommended copycat. Currently I'm running Surge Iron Patriot copycat over speed ancient one anti-venom.
Mhm.
I'm curious if you have any thoughts for like budget replacements for ancient one and speed.
Yeah, I definitely think that you want to swap out both of them. So if you have the ancient one but not speed, you should still swap the ancient one out. If you have speed but not the ancient one, I still think you should swap speed out as well. Um, you for if you have speed but not the ancient one, I would actually play the other Victoria hand build. I just think that if you have all the other cards for that one and you're missing a few here, you should probably play that build. But if you're missing both and you really want to play the IU build, I think you can reasonably cut those for IP Copycat. I think adding another hand generator is definitely good because you're definitely leaning more into the Victoria hand game plan without Ancient One speed. So you're definitely trying to get more generators and that kind of stuff. I think Surge is also a good shout for that sort of build instead of the Anti Venom, just because with having more generators, you really want to be able to like play more. So the play more cards, get them out quicker. So Surge is definitely, I think, going to be good if you're going to play a budget version of this deck. As for the irreplaceable cards, if you are a budget player, I don't think you can replace for Series 5. You cannot replace Victoria Hand. You cannot replace Frigga. I would say you could not replace Luna Snow just because this deck really likes the snowball. I think Luna Snow is a little bit irreplaceable in this deck. You cannot replace Misery, and IU basically just go play the other deck. This deck is built around IU, so I would say he's also irreplaceable.
Hmm.
Yeah. I was curious if you tried like bigger cards ever in your builds, just because like Luna Snow's known for being a ramp card, and when I
Mm-hmm.
built deck with Luna, it's like trying to slot in maybe 2 5s to play. So what's like making this deck function when I use really the only 5 drop that you can play on 4?
Well, it's because that you're not only having the cards in your deck, you're also generating cards, and those also help fill in your Luna curve. So, with most Luna decks, you do want to be running a bit of a heavier curve than this. I mean, two fours and a five is a little bit light for a Luna deck until you're considering that you're generating a ton of cards, like you're generating Town Mandalas, you're generating Mirage cards, you're generating a second Victoria hand with Frigga. When you have this sort of generated cards, they really help fill out your Luna curve. When you have the Quinjet discounts as well, they do help with your Luna curve and making it smooth. I think that the biggest thing with a Luna deck is you definitely want to play test it. Make sure the curve feels smooth. If your curve feels too heavy, try swapping out like a 4 for a 3 or a 3 for a 2. If the curve feels too light, try taking out like a 3 for like a 4 or a 5. I think Luna decks, you really want to play around with the curve until it works. And I've played around with this curve, and I definitely think that this is a correct curve for Luna decks. And it doesn't need to be heavier because of the generated cards filling in the rest of it.
Yeah, and I'll just give a shout out to one of the cards I think is probably underrated. I think Firehair would actually find a nice home if you don't have one of the cards. Fire is really good with IU, and like if you can ramp out the IU early and Misery of Stone, there's some BS you can pull. But even if you just Misery the Hood at Firehair, like you can replace a generator. I think that was one of the suggestions I had given. But honestly, Firehair with Misery, as long as you drop both of them, it's playable and it like you consider a high roll. I think.
All right, so I think you mentioned Fire Hair. I'm low on that card. I think that the problem with Fire Hair is that you need to be running a second destroy card to justify it. And I think you have to run Carnage, but Carnage also has some counter synergy with the deck in this deck specifically, in the sense that you're running a lot of ongoing cards or big bodies, and you don't want to Carnage them. I don't think that this specific deck has a home for Firehair. You could try it, and I also think that Miserying an IU Stone, like the main one you want in Misery is Power. And if you're Miserying it and triggering it with Firehair, 48 seems a little bit overkill.
Yeah, the other consideration with Firehair, because Denish and I were building Luna Firehair Misery ramp stuff, was actually to play Kiddo, because it gives you a lot more control over which on reveal you're repeating. But obviously, that's a very unpopular pick that a lot of people can't have access to cook with yet. That'd be kind of cringe if one of us owned it, honestly.
Talk about a budget choice.
Talking
Yeah.
about very,
Yeah, very budget, Kiddo.
very cringe. All right,
Boo.
Zenit, are we ready to get to your deck?
Yeah, we can go on to
All right, so the next
fun decks.
we are going to be talking about is the Xenaid deck, which has also taken a lot of the Snap, like off meta community by storm. Morgan Le Fay Destroy. This deck, I definitely consider it to be the best Morgan deck. It's the one I've seen people have the most success with, other than Xenaid, which is something I don't know if I could say about a lot of his decks. But this deck, it's definitely good, and you definitely need to keep in mind. So, Xenaid, why don't you walk us through why it's good?
Yeah, so one of the things that I've learned is I'm much of a priority player. I like having access to priority. I don't really like playing tech scam. However, the two tech cards you'll notice. So I guess we'll start from what makes Morgan a card, right? Morgan as a card needs to be drawn, first of all. It needs to be drawn by turn 5. So by turn 5, most of the time you've drawn 8 out of 12 cards in your deck. And that's only around like 66%. And for me, drawing a card around 66% of the time isn't good enough. So the two really cards that stand out and make this deck a lot more consistent will be Angel and Nico Minoru. Because with Angel, you're basically thinning out your deck, so you draw 10 instead of 9 cards if you don't start with Angel in your starting hand. And Nico Minoru, basically, if you get the Destroy draw spell, you can basically snap every game, because it's almost a guaranteed Morgan in hand at that point. It's literally a 92% chance to have Morgan, minus any other shenanigans. The other thing with Morgan is you really need to manage your hand space well. So you don't want that many cards destroyed. Like, no one's playing Squirrel Girl to Killmonger it to get Morgan to activate. But you do want the destroys to be kind of high quality. So, like, thinking cards like Nova, thinking cards like that are bigger, like Hydra Bob, Silver Sable, Rocket Raccoon. Me personally, I don't like those other ones because they don't really synergize with Destroy. So Destroy, when I was looking at as an archetype, is really good at getting priority. From what I was noticing, like normally destroying your card seems to be like a tempo loss. However, cards like Angel help make up for it. Cards that stay on the board like X23 help make up for it. Uncle Ben adds an extra 4 power, helps make up for it. So really, this is just a priority deck. Like you want priority most of the time, and because you're destroying stuff and summoning additional things, you're getting priority more often than your opponent a lot of the time. And when tech deck meta is the soup, every or tech soup is the meta. Every like player is just trying to draw priority like forever. And honestly, if people are trying to drop priority, it makes this deck a lot better. It's semi weak to Mobius, but if you can get the Morgan off with enough destroys, usually you're aiming for 3 destroys. If one of them is Makari, you're really high rolling because that's essentially a free 3/6 that flies out of your hand. Makari is like the card that people have been asking to replace the most, and unfortunately, I think it's irreplaceable in this list just because it thins your hand and it provides you free destroy fodder. Like I don't know if any of you were playing Dormammu, but the problem with destroy sometimes is you just have nothing on the board to destroy. And when you have nothing on the board to destroy, A, you have to use energy to destroy play the card, and then B, you have to like wait a turn or two. It really messes your destroy sequencing. And kind of the goal with this deck is every card that is not Morgan, you do not care. You can like kill your Juggernaut. You can kill your Killmonger.
Right.
You can kill your Sokovia can happen.
So before we get into like the specifics of this deck, we've had this conversation before, but I'm curious your deck building process here because I know for a fact it's different than mine. So like, where do you start with something like this? Because I know a lot of players will look at it and say, "All right, all these cards make sense, but I can't really get here. I could get like 3 or 4 of them." Where it's like, "Oh, Killmonger, Morgan, that makes sense. Death." Whereas once you actually start on the deck building screen, it becomes a lot harder. Where do you actually start for a deck like this?
So yeah, you start by losing a lot of games. First of all, like you just have to lose the games because, especially the higher up in Infinite you go, you can't afford not to run tech cards, right? So like my argument is like if you're trying to play a deck with no tech cards, you have to be better than Mr. Negative, and very few decks are just better than Mr. Negative with no tech cards, right? So then you have to figure out like, okay, what is the tech you have to play around? So like for example, I was a Sauron player. So like you really want to do the thing your deck wants to do while minimizing the tech it needs to run. And with Sauron, you're never able to run Cosmo. So with this deck, it's like, okay, you can run Cosmo and you can run Jug. The reason why Cosmo is so good is because of all the Merlin decks running around. You can Cosmo on their hood. You can Cosmo, and that basically denies them of any value they'll get off that hood card. There's a lot of Destroy running around, and when you Cosmo that Dormammu lane, oh, that gives them depression. Like, I wait till turn 6, and then I just Cosmo that lane they thought they were going to win. And they use 3 energy, I use 3 energy, but I won that trade for sure. But really, it's like thinking about like priority, I think, with a list like this. Like, specifically, the first card I put in with Morgan was Makari. And then you really want to look at the cards that synergize with Morgan, right? So, of the 3s, there's Deathlock, which is the only card that destroys that I did not put, and Kid-O. But Kid-O is just a little bit too slow. And you want to imagine your turn 4, turn 5 playing out. So you know that turn 4 and turn 5 is going to be Morgan. That means turn 3, 2, 1, you want to be getting certain destroys off, right? And you want to be getting value and generating value that doesn't lose priority. Because you know that turn 6, the way you're going to win the game is playing cheap stuff plus Juggernaut or cheap stuff plus Cosmo. And all the things you're doing early game is allowing for that turn 6 to be possible. So it's really about visualizing the plays and the play lines. And a really difficult thing about this deck is also like resource management and all of that, but I think a few of the cards like speak for themselves, right? Like Morgan, Carnage, Venom, Killmonger, 1-drops. But really it's like, okay, what does your deck lose to? And is there a way to like slot in certain tech cards that prevent you from losing to those common things?
Alright, so walk me through. You mentioned Cosmo against Dormammu, Cosmo here, Cosmo there. Is Cosmo doing anything for you to promote your game plan? Or is it sort of just interactive tech? And same with Juggernaut. Like, are you with Cosmo? Are you sort of protecting your death, or what's it called? With Juggernaut, are you protecting something with from a Shadow King? What are we doing with both of those cards, and why were those two the correct tech cards? You believe?
Yeah. So Cosmo and Juggernaut, like Cosmo specifically, is a card that increases your win rate, And it increases your win rate because you're allowed to bully snap when you can Cosmo certain key cards. And it allows you to get priority in this deck because you want to be playing out cards early, right? Not every deck is currently built to play cards early. However, we're running 3/1 drops, and so that like usually allows us to have priority by turn 3. A lot of decks are doing important things on turn 3. Like for example, Denish, you have a 1 in 3 chance to just freaking rip it and then like snap after. That's a free cube. If you see Ravona on the board or see Psylocke on the board, another 1 in 3 chance to just rip a Cosmo and then end the game immediately on the spot. So like half the game plan is like to be able to win with Morgan. The other half of the game plan is really just to make your opponents feel bad about what they're gonna do. Like you see a V hand down and you have Prio, you can Cosmo the Frigga lane. If they're depressed, they might just leave the game, you know? And so things like that help the win rate increase in the deck. I honestly think that's what like boils this down to being a priority list. Why I call it like tempo destroy, because you're reaching for prio in order to use these cards that like abuse you having that prio.
Right, so you're almost saying that it synergizes because it's really good at getting priority. So it's less that the dog is helping the deck and more that the deck is helping the dog.
Right, the deck is helping the dog do what it really wants to do, but also the dog helps protect the deck against some key things, such as when you really want that death game plan to go off, or you're kind of scared of Killmonger on the last turn because you have priority. It makes the dog a lot better at like killing that Invisible Woman Sarah deck, by the way, that's like everywhere, or like those decks that really try to throw priority. A lot of people just forget about Cosmo.
Right. And another point I want to hit on is the 1/drops. What made you settle on Uncle Ben Nico?
So Nico is literally for the destroy. Um, like if you can get that draw spell off, like there's games where I don't play Nico till like turn 3 to greed for that destroy spell because Morgan's not in my hand. Because that's a game like the bad thing about this deck is kind of if you can't scam them with Prio and you don't have Morgan, you're basically like retreating for 1 every single time. So a lot of this deck is built around doing your thing more often because a lot of Marvel Snap, like the thing that makes Marvel Snap more enjoyable is getting to play your cards, getting to play your deck. So that's why Nico is there. It's the best 1-drop at helping you play your deck better. Uncle Ben could be replaceable. You can play Rocket. You can play Sable. However, Uncle Ben can't be early Killmongered, and if it is early Killmongered, you still spawn a 2/4 on the board. So it's probably the best 1-drop to continue with your Prio Vision. The other thing it does is it just scams games. Like that 1-drop on turn 6, you can Carnage it, you can Venom it, and then like an Angel flies out of your hand and it moves a card. Like Uncle Ben on turn 6, if you're able to destroy it, is also just a game winner, a lane winner.
All right, so walk me through. You're just talking about destroy stuff like that. How good is death in this deck, and also why death specifically? Like, is this just like destroy payoff? Because we're not like playing a lot of ones like Squirrel Girl and stuff and destroying those. So walk me through why death when you really are just like triggering like single use cards. What cost does death get to? How does it fit in your curve, etc.
Yeah, so a problem with this deck is it's a very resource like dumping deck. So like the problem is you need a big thing that you're doing. Otherwise, sometimes you just can't win a game. So like a lot of decks have that big thing that they're doing. Death is just the big thing that we're doing. A lot of times, if you can get death to 0, you're basically just winning the game, right? Your God curve is like a 1-on-1, Carnage on 2 that pulls an Angel, Venom on 3. That's 5 destroys immediately. Because the thing with the free cards that you're pulling is you get death fodder. Like you don't care if you're destroying your Angel, you don't care if you're destroying your Makari because Morgan brings them all back, right? And then if X23 stays on the board, that's another death fodder. If your opponent has any 1s and you get Killmonger off, that's death fodder. So in the recent metas, there's a lot of cool death stuff you can do. Like you can even destroy your own death if she gets cheap enough and bring her back with Morgan. But you just need that one big thing because let's say you're just playing. Sometimes on turn 6, you might be playing Morgan, and you might not even play any of your revived cards. You might just be playing Cosmo Juggernaut, and death lets you just kind of put power on the board, and especially in free power is really good. But also sometimes you just don't even care because you're playing a tempo deck. You're like putting so much power on the board already that if they're wasting 3 energy just playing a Mobius, like you don't even care that your death got Mobius unless you're one of those like resource intensive games. So like if you get like Utopia or you get like Elysium, like those locations that discount you, this deck's actually really weak into those because you end up running out your hand. Versus like this deck likes cards like the Hub or like anything that gives you cards in your hand is good because you have more options to play cards. Like your curve is really low in this deck.
Right. Is that something you've considered deck building wise? Because that's what I'm noticing. This almost plays like a zoo deck, except you're not running like a Gilgamesh or any really big guys. You're kind of just you're playing. It's almost like an old school zoo deck where it's okay. I'll play a bunch of little guys, and then I feel like you might struggle to go tall a little, which of course death helps with. Have you messed around with like a null or a death strike or that type of thing, or have you
Yeah,
not
see the
gotten to that
problem
yet?
with like Null Death Strike at the other top end is that your deck is really reliant on playing Morgan on 4 and 5, and when you're so reliant on that curve, it's hard to slot in like room for anything else, right? Because once you play the Morgan down, your next turn is already filled with the things that she's destroyed. So there's no room for like anything that's higher. You'll notice that this deck is a dead to Crimson Cosmos deck because like you can play Morgan in that lane, and honestly, Morgan plus like some scammy stuff with Nico, Makari, Death is enough to win Crimson Cosmos a lot of the time. But it is just a zoo deck. Like you're dumping everything out, and so you have to assess the locations. Like you cannot snap on Elysium because other decks will use it better. Even though like that's a really fun location to play.
All right. I want to move more towards. Oh, Smiz wants to go. I think.
Oh, you're good.
Okay. I want to move a little bit more towards choosing tech cards for like specific metas. I don't think this is the deck to talk about that for though, because I mean Juggernaut is kind of broken, Killmonger is built in, and Cosmo is priority scamming. Can we go to Xenaid deck 2?
Yeah, let's talk
Yeah.
about my.
So
Yeah.
Xenaid's second deck is a Victoria hand deck. It is not a Hand of Ultron sort of spin-off. It is back to the Husky Puppies V hand deck from February of this year. But instead of Mobius in the tech slot, it is Cosmo. And I know Xenaid was really excited to talk about Cosmo in Victoria hand specifically. So Xenaid, take the floor.
Yeah, so Cosmo and Vihan, like as a tech choice, most of us have seen this Vihan list already. Dark Razor, as a shout out, climbed to rank 1 playing a lot of this list. I basically just took the list from him, which he took from Husky. It used to be Mobius, went to Jug, went to Cosmo. For me, I like Cosmo just because the cube equity it brings. What you'll notice about this deck is it's easy to put a lot of power on the board. A lot of your cards are overstated. So that's what makes tech cards like Cosmo or Jug a lot better. Because and Mobius actually, if you're playing above average stats, then you're ahead enough to sacrifice a bit of tempo to deny your opponent's game plan, right? And that's essentially what Jug, Cosmo, and Mobius do. Cosmo in this deck was literally because of freaking KM posting these invisible women's Sarah decks all the time. I don't want to spend that much time thinking about freaking how do I lose Prio, etc. Especially since this deck naturally gets Prio very easily. You're playing a 4-9, a 4-7. And the other thing is like, if the other versions of this deck aren't running Cosmo, no one's thinking about it. Like the amount of times they just Cosmo my V-hand Moonstone lane and said, "What you gonna do about it?" Plot twist: they can't do anything about it. Like you have V-hand Cosmo Moonstone in a lane, and you don't have Prio, they're effed. Like stuff like that. If you have Prio, generally you're waiting till turn 6 to Cosmo, and like with the other VN list, you have a ton of cheap stuff. So right, if you can predict their Killmonger, that's a game-winning thing. And again, Cosmo with Prio just scams you so many games. The cube rate on this deck is like 0.93, by the way, and it's like the deck I've had the most success with.
I do think it is the right choice for the current meta, especially with all the. Well, I'll let you touch on a little bit. What specific matchups is it teching for best, do you think, and how do you prioritize what you tech against versus like what you let slide?
So I prioritize the way I play games is there's always one deck that I never want to have 0 odds again, and that is Mobius, or that is negative. So I don't like playing Mobius personally because it's such a tempo loss. Cosmo helps you win the negative matchup a lot of the time because if you have priority against negative, a lot of things people don't realize is you can just Cosmo their negative or you can Cosmo their Jane. Like once you do that, like their game plan's half out the window. And a lot of it's like reading their deck, reading the locations. If you're good at doing that stuff against negative, you can beat it, right? The other thing is these tech decks, man. Like these tech decks are everywhere, especially when you go to like high infinite. Like top 1000, like people are playing like Gwenpool, Bishop, Merlin, like all that stuff over and over. Like just put Cosmo on the Invisible Woman lane. GG. Like Dormammu's in the meta, right? This like if you can get Prio against these decks that aren't fighting hard for Prio, um, Cosmo just beats them. Like if you get Prio against another V-Hand deck, you can just Cosmo their Hood lane on Misery, and they're super depressed when you do that. You can Cosmo their Frigga. Like using Cosmo really well, basically like is a game winner. Like you can Cosmo early then snap, and when they leave, that's a guaranteed cube. I usually try not to hide like my play behind the Cosmo because you really want their Cosmo to be unexpected. So like for example, if you're pre-snapping the Cosmo on negative, you don't really want to do that because you want it to be unexpected, and you'd rather just take the one cube win against them on stuff like that.
So I actually had a bit of a spin-off of Cosmo and tech in general. We've seen in the meta sort of two things developing right now. First of all, we got Tech Soup, which has been there now for about 1, 2, 3 weeks, and it's sort of in place. But the main competitor for that sort of throne of like the go-to deck is Victoria Hand. So I sort of wanted to touch on V-Hand a bit because this is the second V-Hand deck we featured. Half the decks we are featuring today are Victoria Hand decks. What are our thoughts on V-Hand as a whole? Do we think it's sort of a balanced archetype card? Do we think that it just got more support than the other cards with cards like 4-9 Misery? What do we think about sort of the state of the meta and V-Hand being the one that's challenging the Tech Soup, a card that normally dies pretty tough to Enchantress?
I mean,
I'm
V-Hand doesn't die to Enchantress.
I mean,
That's the thing, right?
the Moonstone builds do kind of.
Yeah, but this isn't like that reliant on Moonstone. Like, I've played V-Hand decks that don't even run Frigga. Like, that might not be correct, but when you play her late, she's putting enough power on the board where she's effectively like a 2/7, 2/9, and like that's pretty good. In general, like the cards themselves are all overstated, right? Like you're playing a 2/3 Iron Patriot gets you a discount. Speed is overstated. Frigga gets you an overstated card. Like you're getting another demon. Moonstone is 4/6. That's a pretty good baseline for a card. Like Gwenpool is 4/6. And then AV is a 4/7 that scales multiplicatively depending on which card you draw. So I mean,
So you're
the
thinking the
stats on
V.
this card are high enough, or stats on this deck are high enough that don't die to Shang. So that's probably why it can easily compete with Tech Soup.
So you're thinking that V Hand is just generally just puts out a lot of base power as well as its ongoing power and the top of stuff like the demons and stuff. You think it just puts enough base power to deal with all the Tech Soup stuff?
Yeah, like if they Enchantress my V-Hand, then I play it out early. Like when I play V-Hand on 2, I don't care most games if they're Enchantressing it or not. Like I'm gonna be honest, like the rest of the deck is doing good enough stuff. Like if I can Misery a Hood and then Cosmo one of their plays, like I'm chilling. Unless they're also high rolling, then I don't really care if my V-Hand gets edged.
See, I have a bit of a different answer to this. I actually think that Vihan's rise is two reasons. One of them is the one you mentioned with Vihan already having a lot of good body over stat cards, but the second one is the Red Guardian nerf. So I think Red Guardian getting nerfed, which was a very natural predator to Vihan, it messed up the Vihan Frigga line, which is an extremely important line in Vihan decks where they would Red Guardian the V hand before it got frigged. If they had Prio, it was always something you could snap on and sort of bully V hand players out of games with just them knowing that the Red Guardian is coming. You could even probably bluff snap it against a few of the best V hand players. But I think that that being gone in combination with what Xenaid said is why Victoria Hand is sort of emerging as like the top non-tech deck in this metagame. I think that the removal of its the sort of nerf and hence the removal. I've barely seen any Red Guardian of its Apex Tech Predator is definitely a reason why I think it's good, and I think it's also a reason that we should really think about what the tech cards really counter when they do get nerfed, because tech card nerfs are pretty rare nowadays, and Red Guardian did catch one, and Red Guardian was, I would probably say, the biggest counter to Victoria Hand herself. Like the deck is Killmonger, But as for V-Hand herself, Red Guardian is definitely the apex predator. So I think when that got taken out, sort of taken out of the ecosystem in a sense, V-Hand has just sort of emerged as a extremely good deck again. And I definitely think that both builds, the old Husky build and my current Infinity Ultron build, are both tier 1 decks. I think you can run either of those to massive success in pre or post Infinite.
Yeah, this is not an area of expertise for me. Obviously, I don't really care about this deck at all. As a Hela player, like it dies to Gambit really, really hard. But from what I've seen, it's putting up numbers that are closer to beating my numbers than like everything else in the game. And so, I mean, I'm not opposed to it being conceived as too strong even. Um, if we were to nerf it, the nerf I'd want is literally just she doesn't buff herself. I think if Victoria Hand didn't buff herself, this deck would be more reasonable. But yeah, the Frigga line is ridiculous. The high roll, where you just get a 2/7 that is functioning as a Victoria Hand also. I think that line is a little goofy. But other than that, I mean, I've never seen this deck as too much of a problem. I haven't played against the Ancient One version enough to, like, find that threatening either, but it seems stronger and possibly could go taller than, like, a Hela deck. I don't know, though. I don't know if it's too strong or not. I think it's probably fine. Especially with Cerebro. That card is ridiculous.
Yeah, I think this deck is pretty chilling in the meta. It's like a good thing that this is one of the best things to do, honestly, because it's really easy to beat. Like it's really easy to beat, but you just have to be playing the right kinds of decks. I think the other problem is like when you say Red Guardian's not being played, it's because priority
I think
decks
Red
aren't being
Guardian is
played
being played
that
less.
much. Like the fact that the Morgan Le Fay destroy is consistent, just getting prio every turn, just means like not enough people are playing gladiator stuff, right? Like I think if you're able to get prio, you can interact with this deck in a lot more meaningful ways.
Please don't make people play Gladiator stuff, because if people play Gladiator stuff, people are going to start playing Stardust stuff. And I don't want to deal with that, Xenaid. Don't do this.
Yeah, but I mean, like,
Please.
even when I'm trying to build priority decks, I'm not playing Glad, right? Because just there's
Right.
enough big stuff in the meta that you really don't want to be playing Glad. Like, you don't really want to play Glad into Hela. You don't really want to play Glad into A lot of people think this Red Wing Destroy thing, and like every time I Glad out a fucking Death or a, like Hulkling, I'm just depressed. So like Glad is not that good right now. Um,
Oh, I don't... Yeah, I don't think Glad's ever really that good, to be
well,
honest.
you're playing Hela all
Even
the time. I don't want to hear it, but like
the the random garbage you can pull. Like, Glad even caught a nerf recently because they put Thanos in the deck now.
yeah.
Whereas you used to be able to Glad against Thanos, now it could just pull Thanos.
I mean, my
Or it's
secret
like,
tech was I used to play Glad and Shang. So if I didn't kill the thing with Glad, I would just Shang it and then Fenris whatever I Shang.
yeah,
Um,
I don't know if that's secret tech, but that's a really good thing to do.
but that was just what I would do when I played Glad. Like I would never play Glad without Shang-Chi in the deck, just because like you have a fail safe, right?
Yeah, I
But
think Glad must be played with a U.S. agent
yeah,
or
that's just
something.
commenting on the meta. Like the problem is the tech soup decks are keeping like the things that go giga tall in check, like the Nimrod BS. Even though this deck runs Shadow King, I don't even know what the stuff that goes giga tall is, but I'm pretty sure V hand just dies to negative, and that's not very fun.
So
Um,
the only chance you have against negative is if you're running the Ultron V hand and you like get a Mirage Misery. That
Well,
after a Jane and you get like two Gores or like Gore Iron Man, like that you can beat them if you have two of their negative cards with +2. But it's tricky.
I'm also pretty sure you're gonna die to the new Jet deck, the PF.
oh yeah.
Yeah, so I think just
Yeah.
I just think the meta isn't fleshed out enough because everyone's just playing Tech Soup, and like of course this deck's gonna thrive when everyone's playing Tech Soup.
Yeah, I almost wonder if V-Hand is the new Hello, where it's like day one metas, what do I play? V-Hand.
I mean,
And
V-Hand's
then
so
it's just
easy
the
to play.
strongest
Like
thing.
you get like
Yeah.
you just see my stats on this deck. Like I guess I just got bored of playing it. Like I have 400 games on Morgan Le Fay. I could barely get to 100 games on this deck.
Yeah.
I just wanna comment. I do think the IU build I think it's better, but I also do think it's a little bit harder to play. So I think if one of the V hand decks was to be played more, I definitely think it's gonna be this one.
I think the other one you even mentioned the negative matchup. I think it beats negative, even like negative high rolls. You're not playing any on reveal cards. Gore's tiny. They have Iron Man. They don't draw Iron Man. They lose instantly. Like you outscale Gore so easily. I play Hela, which is a deck designed to run Gore, and so when I queue into negative, it's like the end of the world. Whereas I've been playing your deck a little bit more, and it's like, wait, this negative guy is not as big as I thought he was. He's still ridiculous, but like I can very reasonably outscale his high rolls.
Yeah.
As long as it's not uber high roll.
Yeah, you can definitely. You
Same
can.
thing with
I
Even
think
without
Tempo.
Mirage.
Don't
Same
get
thing with
twisted.
Tempo
I do
Destroy
think it's
into
still a
negative.
bad matchup, but
I don't think so. I don't know. I've
you're
queued
okay.
into negative
To be
and
fair,
had
you're
them.
also running the copycat in there.
Yeah, but like I beat a negative high roller without cop. Well, okay, I am running copycat, but also I don't have speed, so I can't go with the tall play.
Yeah,
It is my tall play.
I've played a good bit against negative. I think I'm Q positive versus it, which is a good sign because you can scam negative with the Mirage. But
Hmm.
I don't think negative is as much of a death sentence as you think it is. It's just, I still think it's bad. I don't think it's 80-20 bad. I think it's probably like 60-40 bad.
Yeah, I think earlier this week I checked my untapped stats and I had like a 0.55 cube rate against negative. I just love scamming those kiddos. Like, I love beating negative. It's so fun.
Alrighty. So, we've talked a lot about tech and metagame. We've talked a lot about beating Mr. Negative. So, let's go to a deck that loses to negative. Let's go.
Sometimes.
Denish Hela. This deck, everybody knows it and loves it. It's one of the hardest decks to play, I think, in the entire game. But if you can play it well, it's very good. Denish, talk about the Supergiant. It's the 12th card in the slot. You think it's the 12th card right now. Formerly IU, formerly IP. Let's hear it.
I think it's the 11th slot right now, to be honest. It's really, really good. But I'm not going to obviously touch up on the entire deck. I'm going to focus on Supergiant specifically because that's the new part. And that's like the part that I didn't even innovate. This is the exact list that I hit rank 1 with and held for like 2 weeks last December. And so it's not even like this is a new thing. It's just being able to recognize when you're in a meta where you need very specific tech cards. Cosmo is my second favorite tech card for the meta for all the reasons Xenaid mentioned. My first favorite's Supergiant. So if you think about what people are running, it's a whole lot of like, okay, I'm going to do a bunch of ramping stuff on 5 with Merlin, or I'm going to play a bunch of really, really important cards on 5, and then very specific combo. So that would be like the Nimrod deck. Or I'm playing tech piles. And Supergiant deals with all three in very specific ways while benefiting your own game plan. It benefits your own game plan in the sense that you can if you play your Corvus, the famous line is like Corvus Hela Odin. You can play Corvus, and if you know for a fact the opponent doesn't have any tech to deal with you, you can hide the Odin on 5 because you Suji on 4, and then you can Hela on 6, and then the Odin reveals after, which is basically, it removes the RNG of Hela clogging herself, which is just a really good thing to be able to do. It also lets you hide Hela on 5, and then discard a bunch of stuff on 6 if you ramp, and if you don't ramp, you can hide like Blade Ghost Rider, and then whatever you top deck goes onto the Ghost Rider lane that you hid, and you can then play a Blink and blink the Supergiant that you played on 4, on 6, or you can play like a Giganto Raw, and even that's usually strong enough, or you can Odin to reproc Gambit. There's a lot of really, really neat little lines that Supergiant opens that are synergistic, but to deal with the 3 problem decks in the meta that I have trouble against, the first one would be Tech Slop, especially Invisible Woman Tech Slop. So how Supergiant Invisible Woman works is if you play Supergiant cards, they flip at the same time Invisible Woman cards flip in play order. So if you want your Invisible Woman cards to flip at the end of the game, and I play Supergiant turn 5, your Invisible Woman cards are going to flip before my Supergiant cards if you have priority. And I can just throw priority to make that happen, so that your Shang cannot hit my cards. I can also hide like a Giganto, and as long as you have priority going into 5, and you can't really like move stuff because you're playing Invisible Woman, That Giganto will be completely untechable to everything except like Negasonic, and people will often even think it's Hela, and then like Cosmo a Giganto lane or Eliath a Giganto lane, and that's not gonna do much because it's 16 power. It's a big dude. You can, yeah, so it deals with tech slop really well because it just makes it so they can't tech you, and then you go way over their head with 7 power bodies, 8 power bodies, and like 2 really big dudes. Another important matchup is the Nimrod stuff. You'd think it doesn't beat Nimrod that well because they play Nimrod on 6 instead. But what that prevents you from doing is the high roll Arnim Zola stuff. This deck already can gambit like Kid Omega, which is the thing they run, which it'll be like a 1 in 3 because they have only got very few cards at that point. And if you Super Giant with Prio, you can gambit on the last turn, and if you hit like basically anything on the board, it's gonna do something to remove like give or take 9 of their power in their final board state, because it'll either prevent one of the Nimrods from splitting, or it will like prevent the first Nimrod from splitting. And then they tried to hide like a Carnage and a Venom in a lane because they think they're smart, and they do that on 5 and then Nimrod on 6. And then if you gambit their Nimrod, it moved. So now their Venom has no power, or their Carnage just completely whiffs. There's a lot of really good lines you can do to deal with that, as long as you keep in mind the fact you do need to put power on the board at some point, which is a mistake I made for the first like couple hours on the deck, is I wasn't putting enough power down. But once you put power down against Nimrod, you beat it pretty well. And what's the third deck it beats? What else is a problem? I said it earlier, but now I'm brain farting. If one of you guys could help me out.
So
What else does it do well against?
decks that are in the meta
V-Hand?
right now, V-Hand.
Well, it does well against V-Hand because a lot of the time they want to play their hand generators a little later, especially if they're frigging their V-Hand. But there was a very specific, I guess, negative, but
The
like we have
negative is
Legion
just the
for
Legion
that.
slot, right? And this.
Yeah, Legion deals with negative best.
Is it Dormammu?
Dormammu is kind of destroy. I guess we can move on to questions, and if I think about it, then I'll bring it up again. But yeah, Supergiant feels exceptional right now. I think it's the best possible tech card you could be running.
Yeah.
Even better than Cosmo.
So you mentioned that Supergiant feels like the 11th card on the list. What's the 12th?
Giganto. I don't think Giganto is super important. You can just run Gore or Hulkling, or I think Giganto is much more replaceable. I think Legion is basically locked in. That used to be my flex slot. And now I think Supergiant's going to be locked in until the meta shifts. I don't see a world where I cut Supergiant for until like if Thanos comes back, maybe, because that matchup's awful. But like I think she's here to stay.
Okay, so here's a hypothetical I'm going to throw at you. Infinity Ultron gets reverted to his 5/8 3-cost stun state. Does he come back in the deck? Where does he go? If so, is Supergiant just that much better? What happens?
I think Supergiant is more important right now because my issue isn't not being able to outpower decks. Okay. My issue is not being able to outpower decks, and the tech helps deal with that. But Infinity Ultron doesn't solve that problem. It contributes, and I'll be able to win the close ones, but Supergiant just shuts stuff down. Whereas where Infinity Ultron is nice, I think, is when it's a lot harder to tech against the decks, but being able to go taller is going to destroy them. That's why Gore is almost always in the Infinity Ultron build, is because I'm specifically building that to deal with a meta where, like, Thanos is a problem, where I can play Gore and then outscale Thanos, and then Infinity Ultron to outscale Thanos. Both are really good outscaling options, whereas the tech part isn't as important. I'm not going to be able to outscale Shuri Nimrod, whereas if I play Supergiant, a lot of the time I can disrupt them enough that they don't actually get the amount of power that they should be getting with their draw.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing with Supergiant is it's also like a skill check card, right? Like, and you're probably better at playing around Supergiant than 90%, if not all your opponents that are not named Stefan. But yeah, I think that's probably because it used to be IP, right? That was the IP
Right.
slot,
Yeah, that is the IP slot.
and then the IP
It used
slot
to be
turned
IP.
into what else has been in that slot before?
Oh, everything. This is the full flex slot. You can run literally anything. I've run Hobgoblin and it did really well because we were in like a clog meta. Actually, no, that wasn't the clog meta. It was like a... Oh, what meta was that? I don't remember, but it felt very nice.
Oh yeah.
I've
Also,
run
no one's
Claw.
playing Clog right now because Merlin
Yeah.
exists. So one of your worst matchups is like removed, pretty much.
Yep,
Hmm.
absolutely. Claw has been in the slot. IP, Cable, Infinity Ultron, Juggernaut, all sorts of stuff. Not Cosmo though. I tried Cosmo in Hella. Oh my god, absolutely not.
Yeah, I feel like in this current meta, not enough people are running Cosmo because I think against you, Denish, on my matchups and ladder, we basically narrowed our games down to like 50-50s. Like almost
Yep.
every game. I feel like
It
it's
goes
been
one.
50-50.
It's been about 50-50, yeah.
Yeah,
I think
and-
I've gotten slightly better cube equity, but also we're kind of trolling when
yeah.
we're
I mean, we're
playing
playing
each
8 cubers every game, so like
other. Yeah.
that's the other thing. But like my win rate against Hello has been pretty good. But like I'm running like no one's running proactive tech, right? And then Super Guy is punishing all the reactive tech because you can't play reactive tech behind Sugi. Not against a Hello player who who knows what they're doing.
Right.
All
Because
right.
you can either throw Prio or steal Prio depending
Yeah, but,
on
like-
what they're running.
But you probably hate Gamer who plays Negasonic, Cosmo, Jug in every deck. Like your matchup against him is probably horrible.
It's not that bad, actually. I haven't minded it. I just need to recognize that it's Gamer and then play my Blade in my Giganto lane so he Negasonics the Blade.
Yeah, Gamer does
It's-
that a lot.
That's the hidden tech. You just got to
Yeah,
think about
although
that.
Negasonic doesn't feel super good in this meta anyway, so like people aren't really like because I usually play Negasonic in most decks. It's pretty good into Ella, I would say.
That's another card you can't really run in Hella. I find it doesn't really fit the curve very well. The only time you can get it down and effective is on 3 and then on 6 with a 4-drop, which there's just better things to be doing than that. It's fine.
Yeah,
It's okay.
but I guess for me one of the more interesting tech cards is Legion here, because I think when you play Legion and when I play Legion, it's very different. Because we're both big fans of Legion, but I'm a fan of playing Legion with priority, right? So how does Hella like get around playing Legion with priority? Because like for example, I love playing Legion on like Altar of Death. I love playing Legion on Luke's Bar, stuff like that. That like prevents your opponent from playing the game. But that's really only more effective when it has Prio, right? Especially with Sugi, like how are you locking down Prio before turn 5? And how is Legion working with that Sugi interaction? Because you're not playing it till turn 6 a lot of the time.
Right. So what's fun with Legion in Hellas specifically is you don't really need priority to do it. A lot of the things you want to Legion are basically you can't play cards, or if you play cards, they die. And what's fun about Hella is I'm not playing cards to get my power down. So even if I Legion on 5 and I'm losing 2 lanes, I can just Ghost Rider, and then I'm not losing 2 lanes anymore. Or I can Gambit, and Gambit shoots one of their cards, and now I'm not losing 2 lanes anymore. Where even if I don't have Prio, you kind of just have to respect it. Also, Legion in Hellas specifically, there's some really bad locations for me, like Shuri's Lab. That's about it, actually. It's just Shuri's Lab. And Big House. There's probably a couple I'm missing, but there's some really bad ones. To the point where, like, if I don't have Legion, I just have to leave. Where he can save those matches as well by just turning them off. You get as much value out of it as you can, and then you turn it off. And by turn it off, I mean turn everything into, like, Tarnax. And now your opponent is playing Tarnax cards exclusively, and you're playing Hella. There's just so many good locations for Hella.
Yeah,
Where
I think
you don't even need priority anymore.
yeah, I think I approach Legion as he's good in your deck when one of the 3 locations is bad for your opponent, and that happens quite a lot because usually in a game one of the 3 locations is bad for you, right? Like there's a lot of negative locations.
It doesn't even need to be bad for the opponent. It can even be neutral. Like, an example would be Otto's Lab, which is pull a card from your opponent's hand. I just Legion it. Like, what are you gonna do? Play a card, I dare you. You're gonna pull my
Yep.
Giganto. That's what's gonna happen.
That's like favorable to you. I know like other ones that we've had fun with are like the one that flips.
Sakar.
Yeah, Sakar
Oh,
that
I
changed the
love-
interaction now.
Yeah, they changed Sakar. That's a little shout. If you can Legion Sakar at any point, and at the end of the turn it will pull the cards. Not under a Super Giant, because that turn's already over. But like other than that,
Oh yeah,
which that is a goated change. I
we've had
love
some funs
that.
on a Castle Zemo. I know we've had a lot of fun on that one.
Yeah, Castle Zemo's one where you definitely want Prio, but you don't necessarily need it. But
Hmm.
that's the location where when you play a card, it goes to your opponent's side. What I'll do is I'll play the Corvus there, and then I'll blink it, and when you blink a card, it comes back to your side. And so now there'll be a Legion on 4, and then I can play a Jubilee, and they get a 1-power card, and I get, like, Suji. So that's a 6-power play in a lane where I'm not supposed to be able to play cards yet. Or even like a Monster Island, Central Park, Raptors, being able to surprise clog people. Especially when you, like, Jubilee in the lane and then blink the Jubilee into Legion, where you're already kind of clogged there, so you get all the power you can out of it. And your opponent is never ready for it unless they know it's happening, which is not very common.
All right.
It's neat. Being able to own the Legion on like a Monsters Island also, because if your opponent's board is full, yours isn't, you get 10 power.
All right.
Lots
So
of cool little lines.
just to sort of wrap it up here, you've been playing this deck for the better part of a year now. Where do you see this deck's future? As most of the slots haven't really even changed. Do you think this deck has a very strong future? A very strong future? Do you encourage people to try to learn the deck? What is your stance on this deck in the sort of future of the metagame? We've seen some of the data mine cards. It looks like power creep is really kicking in. What do we think about Hela in the future?
A little bit scared. I think we need more support. I think that so there's a card called Redshift that discards the left card of your hand and replaces it with a card of equal cost. I think that we are basically going to creep. Who would it be? Let's. I think Legion's getting cut very soon. Giganto's gonna have to go back to Gore for power reasons, which makes me more susceptible to Enchantress. And I'm gonna try to hold out Supergiant as long as I can. But I need an Enchantress to deal with Stardust also if that card actually releases. Another future release is Cosmic Ghost Rider. That seems really, really good here, especially if people are actually running Stardust and they don't know that I'm running Cosmic Ghost Rider. Um, Other than that, I think Blink Hella with Corvus is kind of coming to the end of the road, to be honest. I think I'm gonna have to rework it to be more of a, almost like a not a negative deck, but like a kind of like a Sheenot deck, where I'm getting discounts on cards and discounts on power, and then playing hella early, and then playing a bunch of discounted cards, or playing a bunch of discounted cards and then playing hella late. And then that's probably where it's gonna go, because being able to redshift your Agatha just seems too good not to do it. You get a free draw out of that, as well as a 14 power card almost every game.
So, would you still convince people to learn the deck, even if you think it might get power crept? I'll speak from personal experience here. I took on the task of learning the deck in about the end of March. I spent 20, 30 hours just playing games with the deck over the period of about a month. Just go. I probably have 1,000 games on the deck at this point. Just playing and playing and playing and playing and playing and learning the lines and stuff. And I feel it made me a better player based on the fact that one, I know what's going on, so I don't get scammed by Denish anymore. And number two, it sort of helps you learn the lines of ramp. Since I was more a low to the ground player, I was a surfer pretty much one trick before I started learning this deck. Do you think that other players could benefit from learning this deck and going like a full deep dive in it? Or do you think it's best for them to wait until the next new version of Hela comes out?
I think this is absolutely a tremendous place to start if you're interested in learning how to play ramp specifically. I think Corvus is the best ramp card in the game, and any time, well, you have to assume we're going to get better ramp cards in the future. And so in order to learn like ramp lines for future decks, you can get some practice in on this one. I think that this is a really good example of what ramp will look like almost any time it's good. Is you have really inconsistent play lines, but you have a lot of them. And so you have enough that one of them will happen. And that's kind of like the almost, I think that's the best way to build ramp for Snap. And so if you're interested in Hela specifically, I don't think it's worth learning right now because by the time you learn it, it'll be gone. But if you're interested in ramp, we'll get stuff like this in the future. And so it's a really, really good place to start. Also, playing any deck that uses Legion as well as this one, you learn a lot of really, really specific interactions that can just win you free cubes. Like the Sakar thing, the being able to blink across the board is important to know. You learn a lot of move interactions because Legion has some weird stuff with move locations. You learn about basically on reveal staging order with Hela, as in, oh, my Odin triggered while the Hell is triggering. How do like the loops work, and like when does it actually trigger? So yeah, it's good to learn, but not necessarily if you're interested in Hela. Just more so if you're interested in ramp. Also, to add on to that, Supergiant has a lot of really, really small niche mechanics that people don't know about. I don't want to go into too much detail because it's almost like a Snap secret. We might do a whole episode, a whole segment on that in the future. So make sure to tune in next time. But yeah, Supergiant also is a really good card to learn how to use. So
Yeah. All
yeah,
right.
it's good to learn.
That's gonna be it for us mainly. You can find us. You can find Denish at twitch.tv/Denish_Hella. He's also active in the Roram Plays, Husky Puppies, and main Marvel Snap Discords. You can find Xenaid at twitch.tv/XenaidTFT. He is most often active in the Roram Plays and Husky Puppies Discord. You can find me at youtube.com/SnapAcademyYT. And you can also find me in most of the time the Roram Plays Husky Puppies and main Snap Discord. Do we have any parting words or are we good?
My DMs are
Um,
open. You know, we love talking
yeah.
about the game in general. If people want to like learn better, be better at climbing or deck building, like I'm not gonna say I'm the best at building every deck, but a lot of people like will add us in the discords or at me like if they're playing Sauron, if they're playing Morgan stuff. Deck building is just like the most fun part of Marvel Snap, and I encourage anyone to do more of it.
Absolutely. Build more decks. Yeah, like Xenaid said, though, DMs are open. I'd love to respond to people.
Yeah.
Ping me if you see me in the wild. I'll say hi. Go watch the Twitch stream that I do once every other week or whenever it happens. It's fun. Just mess around. That's about it. Build decks.
I third that. Build decks. Find what you
Yeah.
like. Build the decks. Play your decks. The most fun you'll have playing this game is building your deck. I know when I like really smile when I'm playing this game is when I queue ladder and I go up against somebody using my deck. That makes me really happy seeing that somebody took my deck and decided to use it for themselves.
Yeah, and you're not going to win at first either. That's fine. You'll win eventually, and then you'll win really, really hard, and then you'll hit like top one by accident.
Yeah,
So just
when you find your hidden niche or you find a meta breaking deck, which I think all of us have found at one point something that was just so far ahead of the meta that we just started climbing ranks like it was easy for us. When you find that, it will all be worth it.
yeah, and stick with it. It takes time. Little shout out. I forget who it is, and now I'm gonna pull up their name real quick. There's a Red Wing builder who is like 2 weeks away from cracking the meta wide open with Red Wing.
Is it the Snap Nation?
Yeah, it is the Snap Nation. Shout out to that guy. That guy's been on Red Wing for a really long time. I respect the hell out of that guy.
Yeah,
He's almost got it. He doesn't quite have it, but he's almost got it with Red Wing. It's really good.
that's the
So yeah,
deck that I would look out for in the future. That seems strong. It got its tools and now it's just putting all the stuff in the right place.
yep. All right.
All
Build
right.
decks.
Build decks, and we will see you next time for episode number 3.
Yeah. Peace.
Peace.